Can you remember the last commencement speech you listened to? Did you walk out of there thinking, wow, that was amazing? Or did you walk out of there thinking, wow, that was amazing? Probably more the latter than the former, I think. Why is it that so many commencement speeches are so bad? Well, let me tell you about one particular commencement speech. It was on June 12, 2005, at Stanford University in California. The speaker was Steve Jobs, president of Apple Computer. That day, Steve gave what is widely considered not only one of the best commencement speeches ever given, but a really fine speech of any kind. So what did he talk about that day? Did he talk about how to transition into a career in technology? No. Did he talk about dishing the dirt on some Silicon Valley entrepreneurs? No. Okay, well, it must have been how to make your first $1 million before you're 25 years old. Nope, none of those things. What he did was he told 3 stories. In his words, all I'm doing today is telling 3 stories. That's it. No big deal. That was it. That's what he said. Here's Steve at Stanford. If you look around today, stories are everywhere. In the business world, all you got to do is pick up any business publication or listen to any business podcast, and they're talking about stories. I mean, Toastmasters Magazine. This was a specific issue that was just about stories, but really, if you look at any Toastmasters issue now, somewhere they're going to talk about stories. Forbes Magazine. Again, half the issues have things about stories in there. The one on the right there is named Nancy Duarte. She's very well known. And she was actually, probably her main claim to fame was teaching Al Gore how not to be intensely boring. And actually, her coaching led to the movie It's an Inconvenient Truth. And finally, a well-known blogger says that storytelling is the business skill that we should learn for the next 5 years. So I read all about this, and I asked, well, why? Why is it that stories are so compelling? Why is it that there's something that we should learn? And I think there's a few reasons. Stories grab us. They grab us in a way that facts and figures and dry historical recollections never can. They make us want to hear more. I mean, if you're going into your typical commencement speech, what are you going to hear? Well, you should do this, and you young people, you have the whole life ahead of you. What is that? Do you want to hear more? No. But in Steve Jobs' commencement speech, he made people want to hear more because he told stories. They can touch our hearts. They can make us care about what's going on and make us want to improve ourselves and improve the world around us. You want proof? How did I start this presentation today? Dan, my evaluator, what is the name of the manual that I'm speaking out of?
Storytelling?
No.
No, the technical presentations.
Technical presentations. How do most technical presentations start? Boring. I know, I do lots of them. And they're all boring. Okay, but how did I start this one today? With a story about Steve Jobs telling stories. If I had started this with facts and figures and explaining all about how stories grab you, and there have been all through civilization for the last 10,000 years, that's the way most articles on stories start. They don't start with a story. So I thought, this is great. With all this emphasis on storytelling out there, I should be able to learn how to tell stories. But the problem is, how? How do you do it? What I found is most of these articles, most of these books, they assume that you know how to tell stories already. It reminds me of something that happened to me just 2 weeks ago. I was at a humorous speech contest at another club, and I gave a speech, and it was okay, I guess. But one of the comments that was from one of my evaluators there, he said, the problem with your speech is it's not funny enough. And then the helpful way he helped me to improve the speech, he said, you have to make it funnier. Well, he was right. I have no doubt about that. But the problem is, how do I do that? I mean, I made it as funny as I could. And so that was what I felt about so many of these storytelling things. They assume that you know what you're doing. So I went on a quest. I went on a quest to figure out how storytelling works. I got books and CDs all over the place. Most of them were on my Kindle, but then I got a pile of CDs at home. I went to watch professional storytellers like Donald Davis, who was an excellent storyteller from the Appalachians. He lives out in the Outer Banks now. Craig Valentine. I went to Craig and Darren LaCroix's workshop on storytelling. These guys are both world champions of public speaking in Toastmasters. I also took other workshops from professional storytellers like Kim Weitkamp and Elizabeth Ellis. I don't know if you know who any of these people are, but they're all very well known in the storytelling world. And I learned a few things, I'm pleased to say. And so I'm going to tell you a few things that I learned. But first, let me tell you a story. Just a story. No big deal. I'm actually going to tell you two stories. It's one story, two different ways. Let me tell it the first way. When I was a kid, my first grade teacher told us that we needed to write half a K down on a piece of paper. I didn't know what half a K was, so I wrote a whole K. Well, I got in trouble, but half the class didn't know what she was talking about, so we all got in trouble, but we couldn't get in too much trouble. And so I had to go home and tell my dad, and he couldn't figure it out either. The end. Great story, right? Let me tell you another story. Do you remember the first time you realized that adults don't know absolutely everything? Julie's looking at me like, they don't? I know. I remember. It was in first grade. I was at Our Lady of Good Counsel Catholic School in Vienna, Virginia. The year was 1967. I see everybody calculating my age now. That's okay. My teacher that year was Sister Thomas Marguerite. Now, Sister Thomas Marguerite was a tall, stately nun, dressed in black from head to toe, like most nuns. And she could be very strict. I mean, my knuckles remember that. But you knew that she was strict because she cared about us. Have you ever had a teacher like that, where they were strict, but you know it's because they cared how you turned out? Well, Sister Thomas Marguerite was like that. In fact, I really looked up to Sister Thomas Marguerite. She was sort of my first grade hero. So one day, Sister Thomas Marguerite was in class, and she said, "All right now, class, I want you to make half a K." And I thought, half a K? I don't know what half a K is. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Should I not do anything, or should I try, write something down? Now, you may be looking at me now thinking, well, why didn't you just ask? Why didn't you ask what half a K was? Well, excuse me, but have you ever been in first grade? You don't want to stand out from the crowd. You want to fit in with the crowd. And that's what I wanted to do that day. And so I didn't ask. What I did is I wrote down a whole K. After all, I didn't want my friend Bobby Kennedy in my class saying, "Stupid Besaga, you don't even know what half a K is." Okay? From Bobby Kennedy, that would be a bad thing. So I wrote down a whole K. Well, that day, Sister Thomas Marguerite walked down the aisle and looked at the pieces of paper. And she saw my paper. And she made that noise that all students hate to hear teachers make. "Mr. Besaga, go stand by the board." Stupid half a K. Stupid Sister Thomas Marguerite. And I stood at the board. And all my classmates were looking at me. And I was embarrassed. They were looking at me with their faces, with this look on their faces, with this intelligent, smug, half a K making look. And I didn't know. Well, it turned out, as I was standing up there, shortly after, who did I see next to me? It was Christine Condon. And then a minute later, Jeff Curtis. And then a minute later, Bobby Kennedy himself was standing up there. None of us had any idea what half a K was. Well, I think she wanted to punish us, but she couldn't very well do it. I mean, after a while, even first graders can put up a formidable opposition. So she let it go back. But I still had to tell my dad. And there, it was just me. But my dad, so I told him, Dad, got in trouble. What'd you do? Sister Thomas Marguerite told me to make half a K, and I made a whole K. He looked at me, what is half a K? I said, Dad, I have no idea. You know, that was almost 50 years ago. I still have no idea what half a K is. In fact, my dad and I, we still laugh about it sometimes. What's half a K? We have no idea. But this taught me two things. First off, adults don't know everything. Sister Thomas Marguerite had no idea what she was asking us for. She had no idea how that would come into our brains. And second off, if you want to be clear, if you want people to be successful, give them success criteria. Don't ask them to make half a K. So that's the story. Same story, right? But it's not. They're not the same story. And so what I learned was there are things that you can do. And I learned a few secrets, and I just want to mention a couple. What I found out was that it's not just that I don't know how to tell stories, it's that most stories actually start out bare bones, like that first one I told. They don't start out fully formed. Second thing I learned is you're never done. People keep working on these stories over and over again. Even professional storytellers are constantly modifying their stories. And finally, there is a process you can learn. That's the really good news. I don't have time to talk about the process today. I'll talk about this in another speech another time. But there's a process that I can share with you all, if you're interested, to learn how to tell better stories. It consists of building the characters in your story, building circumstances, building conflict, working on your questions. I had to get it into it, make it like a C. Conversations in the story between your characters, a cure, how you learned the new thing, change, what I am today, a carry-out message that gives people something to take home with them, and finally, a callback. It gives you a deeper connection with people. There's good and bad news about this. The bad news is most of us are not born storytellers. I'm not. The good news is that there are good materials that you can use to learn to be a better storyteller. The better news is that there's actually clubs that you can join. I'm a member of another Toastmasters club. It's an advanced club, so you are members of other clubs also, that is concentrating just on storytelling. The best news of all, you can start out knowing how to tell stories and learn how to do it. Mr. Toastmaster? Oh, yes, thank you. I will now, I guess, if you can check for 5 minutes, Kathy, or actually I went long, so maybe 3 minutes for questions. We'll see if there's any questions. This is part of this assignment, is answering questions. So if anybody has any, yes, Jill?
What was your search criteria in looking for resources?
Well, that's a good question. First off, they have to know how to tell stories. Might be kind of a good idea. Okay, so I picked the two best resources that I found were by Craig Valentine, who tells excellent stories, and by Elizabeth Ellis, who I actually got a chance to meet and spend a weekend workshop with her in May. And so look for that. And then the second one was, did they really give you a process that you can work through and not just kind of assume, well, you'll figure it out? And both of them were really good on that aspect.
How do you incorporate stories into your daily career?
Good question. That's an excellent question. I do a number of presentations in my job. I'm a techie. I'm a API architect. It's a software thing, and I do a number of technical presentations. And what I found is by starting with a story. You know the old advice that you hear: start with a joke, which is like terrible advice. Don't ever do it. A much better advice is start with a story. And so I did that. In fact, just last week, I had a presentation. It was an hour-long presentation on a new technology that we have that actually I just got a patent on. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'd applaud you. So what I decided to do is I decided to put a story in there. And that's how I did it. I started out with a story to tell people, why is it that the thing you're learning today is so important? Because I could have just started with the technical, oh, this is a Power Query, and you can invoke it this way, and it modifies the SQL in the line. But it was much more effective if I could say, this is an amazing capability we have. What it allows our customers and what our partners to do is to put their own queries in the system and get out any unlimited data that they want. And this is an amazing feature of our API that very few APIs have. So I could tell a story about how we could help partners do their jobs better. Leslie?
What did they say about vocal variety when you're telling a story?
It's a good thing. A lot of it is around the dialogue, and that's one of the things. That's one of the biggest things I learned about storytelling is how important dialogue is. And so you notice that's one of the big differences between my not so good story and my maybe not great but better story. Is the first one had zero dialogue. The second one was probably a mixture of about half and half, and that's the kind of mixture that you're looking for. And that is where it gives you the opportunity to do vocal variety.
How long did it take you to develop that story?
Gosh, a few weeks, I guess, on and off. I mean, and just like with anything, the first time you tell it is not it. I mean, I've told that story 5 or 6 times in public now, and it's evolved every single time. So you go home, and this is why I always video myself. You see the camera there. So you watch it, and you evolve the story. And that was exactly what I did. I took those step-by-step things and said, where's my circumstance? Where's my conflict? Where's my characters? Okay.
Are you drawing your stories more from personal experience, or are you making some up, fiction to suit the...
Mostly personal, just because that works well in public speaking in general. I do have a story. Some of you have heard it's about St. Peter, the Apostle Peter. I think I've told it here. Yeah. That's a good example. That's right. It was a while ago. I told that. That was a good example of a historical one. But a lot of times when you use them in other speeches, personal ones can be more impactful. But both, really. A great example, actually, of non-personal is if you're doing a historical presentation, it can be really, really boring unless you give the personal story of somebody involved. Not just the Civil War, but Joe the soldier in the Civil War. Okay, one more question? No more? All right. Thank you very much.